Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 16. It's called Ethics. So full spoilers for the episode as always. We were supposed to be skipping a week actually. I put out the previous episode up for patrons just today, and I put a note on it saying, oh, there won't be one next week because Connor's not available till late next week, so no episode. And I like 20 minutes later I put a reply on it saying, never mind, he's free. He's free to record for a while.
Circumstances have changed.
My attack dog finally made its way to Connor's location and took him out.
I wish I could say he was joking.
Well, maybe my dog's a joke, but yes, the rest of it's true.
The rest of it's true. One word of that was a lie.
So yeah, how exactly did a dog break 2 bones in your arm?
Right, so it jumped at me.
Uh-huh.
And it was a fairly hefty dog with some weight to it. So I brought my arm up, as you do.
Mm-hmm.
It hit my arm. That wasn't the real problem, though, because that arm's actually okay. It's when the force of it jumping, and because it kind of took a running jump, knocked me back down, and I fell onto the road.
So it was the
way I
landing.
landed, yeah, when I landed on my arm, that I have fractured my elbow and very likely my wrist, but they couldn't confirm that. I'm just very lucky there were no cars coming at the road.
I don't doubt that there's no. I don't doubt that there isn't some dogs that are strong enough to just break your bone with a bite.
I'm sure with a good bite, yeah, some of them probably could, yeah.
But I was assuming that this wasn't quite that powerful. Yeah, so it was the fall and the awkward landing.
It was the fall and the landing, yeah. And
okay.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize it was that bad at first. I was like, all right, okay, that wasn't pleasant. Carry on. And then by the time I got to work, I was like, this hurts. Maybe I should go get this checked out.
So now that you're lesser than you were before, if you wish me to assist you in anything, I am volunteering. I'll
be honest, I had forgotten what this episode was. We started it, and like 5 minutes in, I was like, okay. Suddenly I'm relating to this episode more than I would have yesterday.
Oh dear. Yeah, so I've got a few more jokes, but I'll save them for the comics podcast. Where I suspect there'll be more. Don't want to
blow your load all at once.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be more conversation about this on that. But yeah, so this is the episode that, from the description of this one, sounded quite hefty. Sounded like it had a lot of potential. Worf gets injured, his spinal column in particular. Pretty serious business. And he's told that he's probably never going to walk again. Now, there's obviously some hope, and obviously, us watching this show, we know he's going to be in future movies and future seasons, and even a few, like Deep Space Nine, he's in that. He's in a whole other show, so yeah. feeling quite positive about his outlook from a meta point of view. But in the context of the episode, he's told that he's probably never going to walk again, and it's all very like sad and morose, and everyone's kind of like, and he because he's a Klingon, he has this honor and being seen. He doesn't want anyone to see him. He even apologizes to Riker because he asked Riker to come and see him. He's like, I apologize that you have to see me like this, and Riker's like, you don't have to apologize. Like this is okay. I don't like, everyone else is sympathetic, but that's not the Klingon way, so that's not how he's looking at it. But he wants Riker to help him with suicide. Obviously, he's a Klingon, so there's a name for it. There's a whole ritual that you're supposed to do in this situation. And we also have the debate of this doctor who comes on board who's doing some experimental spinal surgery and wants to try some things out. And she clashes with Crusher a little bit. And that's the basics of the episode. So I guess I'll ask the question, but I will remind a statement that we said at the end of the last review, where we said that if this falls short of being excellent, it's probably going to be a disappointment based on what it could be. So I will ask the question, did it live up to that statement?
I think it did. I do not think this is a disappointment.
Oh, that's nice. I think it's a little bit of a disappointment.
Okay.
Not harshly. Like, it's good, but I don't think it's great. And I think there's a few little things that kind of get in the way for me that stop it from just feeling like it's a pure exploration of the core topic at hand that I wanted them to focus on.
I think the first half of the episode is that greatness. I think the second half where it delves more into the Doctor's ethics rather than, the Worf problem itself and Riker grappling with that. And that stuff's a little bit weaker for sure. But when it's dealing with that Worf stuff, I think it is great.
Yeah, I guess the two key things that stick out to me that is one, I think Riker has a bit of a cop-out in the way he deals with this dilemma. Like, I liked him debating with Picard and saying, I don't want to do this, and Picard's like, you have to respect his wishes. He's asking this because you're his friend. So he respects you, he considers you someone close to him, so maybe you should, honor this even if you don't agree with what he's doing. And okay, that stuff's all fine, and like Riker struggling with this is interesting. His reaction when he's asked is also pretty engaging to watch, to see him kind of process this. But ultimately, when he comes back and says he's been reading up on the Klingon lore and like the rituals and stuff, he starts talking about the ins and outs. All of a sudden, it started to feel like a lawyer who's found a loophole, as opposed to like a friend who's actually really struggled with the decision. And it felt a lot. And don't get me wrong, I do understand that by the end of the scene, he's kind of trying to use Worf's son as a way to kind of break through to him and make him understand why this is a problematic thing to ask him to do, and maybe just give Worf a reason to want to stick around, something that will break through all of his tendencies and all of his first instincts here. I understand all that, but there was part of me that when he just sort of says, but it's not supposed to just be anyone, it's supposed to be a close family member. In fact, ideally, it would be the firstborn son. And it just so happens that Worf has a firstborn son on the ship. Yeah,
and that firstborn son just knocking around over there.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. Like, I don't hate it, but it did feel like it felt like a slightly easier way out of like Riker's decision than I think I was excited about or looking forward to, or like him like really coming to terms with it.
That's fair. I think for me, because I completely understand where that's coming from, that feeling. But even though it does come at it from that, like, analytical loophole sort of way, I still like what it does by the end of that scene enough that I'm kind of willing to let it slide.
Yeah, I can see that. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is what you kind of alluded to, is that we do actually end up devoting just as much time to the conflict between Crusher and this other doctor. And I'm not saying there's not an interesting debate to be had with this, this other doctor's, well, I mean, ethics, I mean, to use the title of the episode, but more specifically, her, like, wanting to risk more, like, new and, like, extreme procedures that aren't guaranteed to work, that they're still in the experimental phase, and they're trying to, like, get, figure them out. She's done simulations, but never on a living being before. Certainly not a Klingon. I mean, not any living beings. I mean, they make that clear, but specifically Klingon. Like, presumably most of the people she's been testing this on, even in holograms, have all been human, because she's a human doctor. And it becomes this kind of debate about Crusher, like, not wanting to risk Worf's life. And there is kind of an interesting question that it presents forth, is, like, because probably the most interesting part of this side of the episode to me was when Picard comes to Crusher and says, look, it's either you let Worf make this choice to have this surgery to be 100%, or he's going to kill himself, because he's like, that's the way his culture sees this. So this is,
so why not?
You might as well. And Crusher, like, and ultimately this is what convinces her and why she lets it happen. But like, her problem before that though is that she doesn't believe in trying to give the patient a false hope of some miracle cure that might fix everything, when she doesn't really believe it's going to happen. Like, the simulations that were ran only were successful like 35% of the time. It wasn't a great,
It was pretty low, yeah. I think it was like 37, but yeah, it was low.
I mean, 1 in 3 isn't the worst odds in the world.
It's not, and I think the case is, for most people, that's like, no, you can learn to live with that. Yeah, this disability, and you will, be able to continue living. But as they point out, for Worf, that's kind of not really an option. So 1 in 3 is pretty good odds.
Yeah, I think that was maybe the other thing that really felt a little bit underexplored to me, because we talked last. Okay, so we've obviously got the euthanasia side of this to look at, but also the idea of Worf seeing having a disability as being, well, it's not worth living anymore. I should just die now. Obviously, it's brought up a lot in this episode. I don't know if they really explore it, because if everyone just kind of accepts that Klingons don't accept that, like, Picard immediately is like, I don't know, as far as he's concerned, he died the moment he got injured, and
I would say Picard's the only one who has that opinion. Everyone else does argue with it. Like, Riker really hates that idea. That's kind of his whole dilemma. Crusher doesn't like this idea because she keeps pushing that, well, no, if we don't give him the option for this miracle cure, we might be able to talk him into something else.
Yeah, of course. I don't know, what I mean is that I don't think it ever really comes back to Worf, though. Like there's never really even an I mean, obviously there's the scene where they came in with the more tried and true method where they can we can give you like 60 to 70% of your mobility back with these doohickeys and implants, and
he's like, screw that.
He's like, I'm not walking around like someone with bad knees, basically. So, so there's that attempt, but like the actual interesting debate of like, because I think Crusher has a throwaway line when she's talking to Picard where, let's forget for a minute that someone with this disability can have a healthy, successful life, right? And even more so in this, utopia that is the Federation's future. I totally believe that. It's never really brought to Worf. It's never like, no one even tries to entertain him with the idea that you can live a good life without this. And I'm not saying it should have worked. I'm not saying they should have convinced him, because that would maybe be against Worf's character, but it felt a little bit like it wasn't, I don't know.
I get where you come from. I do. I think they do want to bring it to Worf, and Picard basically stops them when he's like, no, you got to just respect it. Because all these characters are like, but Worf could be fine. He could, well, not fine, but relatively speaking, he can make do. And Picard's like, no, leave him be. Let him suffer. So they all do. So no one tries to convince him because Picard tells them not to.
Maybe what's missing for me is a scene where Picard goes to see him or something and doesn't try to convince him of anything, but just says, this is how everyone in the ship's feeling. This is what everyone around you is feeling right now. And like tries to have an open conversation. And again, not to convince him of anything, but just to have this open dialogue of, this is how everyone feels, and I understand why you feel the way you do. And instead, it's kind of like, no, Riker's like loophole brings his son into it, and because of that, it almost like, I don't want to say it manipulates him, because that's a bit unfair, because like I do believe that he wants to stick around for his son, right? And like that's what ultimately makes him go, no, I'm not going to like live my life, any lesser, but I will take this risky, procedure, and it might work, and I might be back to, and I can be your father. Or I might die. There's a good chance I'm still going to die. It just won't be in my hand. And they kind of accept that. Some of the better scenes, though, in the episode are, absolutely when he does put on the little like leg brace things to try and talk to his son, but then he gets really embarrassed when he falls down, and he demands that Alexander leave the room. Those scenes are well done.
They are. And to go back to your point about Picard, I think what the scene is, because I know what scene you need. I know where it needs to be. At least I think I do. It needs to be before Picard and Riker have their conversation. I think you need Picard going to see Worf then, and maybe not even like trying to convince him of what's in, but Worf talking to Picard about this is why he is making this choice, and Picard even just mostly just listening to that and kind of maybe having a little bit of, well, have you considered this? But Worf, shutting him down. So then when Picard is telling Riker and telling Crusher and everyone else, no, this is how it is, he's had this from Worf now, rather than just general Klingon experience.
And even aside from the idea of like what they talk about, it is kind of a bit weird that there's not a scene with Picard with Worf after his accident. Like, I mean, I assume he did go to see him because he's the captain and he cares, but it is kind of odd not to see at least a little bit of interaction with them.
He's a very busy man.
It doesn't look like it in the episode, to be honest. Because I really like when Worf goes in for his surgery and him and Riker are sitting and they're just talking about mundane business. I've scheduled this for tomorrow and this is happening, and blah blah blah. And there's just a sort of really intense close-up moment where they say, have you heard anything yet? And there's no word. And I really felt that in the moment they were concerned, and that was really nice. Like that's well handled. I guess it kind of skirts around some of like the more interesting like debates that I felt could have been had in this episode. And I think there's a weird thing in the last 10 minutes where he goes in for the procedure and they do this, like he dies on the operating table, which admittedly made me do a double take, because I'm like, Wait, what?
What's going on? Yeah, I did the same.
I know he's around again, so like, go on, like, explain yourselves.
I will give them the slightest bit of, not even credit here, but just relief on my part that I thought they were going to pull the shit that you hate from Doctor Who, where the kid comes in and love fixes him almost essentially. Like I thought for a second, like, are you going to pull some shit like that? Which I love in Doctor Who. I would not love in Star Trek, right? Very different style of show.
I don't, because this is the thing. Like, again, this feels like much like the Riker thing, feel like a little bit of a cop out. I felt like them planting this Klingons have redundancies in their system to make up in case anything fails. That felt like a bit of I don't know, like here's like why we can have a death scene later and treat it seriously, but then have like a miraculous recovery. 5 minutes later. And I felt a little bit of cynicism as he's waking back up and everyone's also happy and he's like, oh my god, the redundancies are kicking in. They've got nerve control, there's redundancy nerves, there's nerves, and they're all getting excited and like everyone's happy. I felt a little bit of just like typical TV melodrama and the near death,
That is fair. I think still technical death, but I don't know. At least they set up that there were redundancies. Maybe not this specific one, but the idea of Klingons having redundancies for everything evolutionary is just okay. That was established earlier in the episode. Yes, it's almost cheap in that you want your like you say your big TV drama moment at the end, but at least there was a reason for it.
That's true. I can't deny that, but it's not like none of these things that I've brought up are like criminally terrible or like complete misfires. There's just enough of these things that I feel like aren't great that overall detract from, I think, the episode. Like the ceiling that it could have hit, I think, was much higher. And
that's fair.
I think it's a fine episode. I think there's some good moments in there. Worf asking Troy to like be mother to to Alexander should he perish, I thought was a decent scene.
Interesting choice.
No, I mean, to be fair to the writers here, like she was directly, I mean, she was a little bit intrusive, admittedly, from memory, but she was heavily involved in a lot of like the first stories of him coming aboard the ship. That episode where he was like stealing stuff and dealing with the teachers and stuff. So she was heavily involved. So it did kind of. Although if they're establishing that Riker's this good friend with them this episode, is like, why is he not asking Riker? I mean, that's maybe he's thinking, Riker and Troy will end up together later, so
it'll be fine. Yeah,
I'll put him with Riker, or I'll put him with Troy, and then Riker will become the dad in time, and that'll be,
probably. That's probably what he's thinking.
Happy family, and he can be the big brother to the little girl from the second Annabelle and the second Ouija movies. She's the daughter in Picard. Just
okay. I'm very lost right now.
Yeah, they've got a daughter in Picard, and it's the actress who was in those movies.
Okay, I was particularly lost because obviously I've not watched Picard, and I've also not watched those movies. So I was like, this is two references over my head.
Sure. And then I think she was also, I want to say that was the same actress who went on to be in that Kevin James movie, where it's not a comedy, it's that one where Kevin James is playing like a villain, he's like a prisoner who's like kidnapped a family and she's like running around like trying to like save her family.
I do not remember what movie this is.
It came like a year or two ago. She's a good actress, actually. She's a good, I mean, nothing to do with this episode. I've just kind of stumbled onto the subject through some tangential stuff.
By all means, yeah.
But yes, so yeah, but like there was good individual scenes, and obviously the core ideas are really strong. But when it came to like, things like, okay, so they've got these like patients from this disaster that they're helping treat on the ship, and Crusher gets pissed at this other doctor because she gives this experimental drug to a patient that ultimately, not so much the drug kills the patient, but not giving him the more conventional thing might be why he's dead, and sort of questions this, and she gives this speech about, well, you know, the data I have got from this failure will one day help save thousands and millions of people. Like, isn't that enough? And Crusher's like, yeah, but you could have saved this one. Like, this one could have been saved. And, you know, Crusher's right. I think fundamentally it's like save who's here and now first. Like, that's always first.
there's nothing wrong with this stuff in this episode. I think the problem is there's not enough of it to justify it being this episode. It needs a full episode to itself, this plot, really.
Yeah.
To do it justice. And we're obviously inherently more invested in the Worf stuff because we care about Worf.
Yeah, like,
so I think it was a bad episode to put this in.
Like, I think having this be part of like Worf's decision of whether or not he wants to take this, which ultimately doesn't really feel like that much of a, like, it's kind of the choice he makes because of the other things that happened to him, and it's the only choice he has left, rather than because this choice is actually weighed up against like the other treatments or weighed up against anything else. It's just, well, if I'm deciding not to kill myself, then it's because I'm taking this long shot. So the actual debate of this experimental treatment versus the conventional treatment, which sounds pretty good by, like, you know, you won't be an athlete anymore, for example, if you're an athlete.
You'll walk.
But you'll be able to walk around and you'll still function and whatever. That debate, like, is potentially quite interesting and has a lot of like moral grey area to kind of cover, and like people risking themselves and all that stuff. But this maybe isn't the episode for it. It's kind of tacked on to a far more interesting character choice that is infinitely more fascinating to us as viewers of Star Trek.
It is. And I think I like this episode more than you did because I think I enjoyed some of those Worf elements a little bit more. But this stuff with the Doctor is definitely tacked on and frustratingly takes away time that we could have explored the Worf stuff more. So that does stop it being, like, you know, a standout, you know, best of Trek episode.
I think that's
this had the potential to be.
Yeah, I think that's what's frustrating to me, is that as it was spending time on more of this stuff in the back half of the episode, I thought that this could be more time to the Worf stuff to explore all the things I wanted to. And instead,
I did like everything it did explore with Worf quite a lot. So yeah, it's got something good for it at least.
Yeah. We have to. This is a brief point, but they've slightly upgraded or changed the operating outfits for the surgeons. They're still kind of like, they're not the full-on nun looking thing that they had before, but they're still headdress and all that.
Yeah, they're a bit more woolen, maybe. They look thicker now.
They almost look more like obviously they're not actually chainmail, but they almost look like the fabric version of a chainmail, like under, like for like a knight would wear under his armor.
yeah, they do. Yeah,
it's like a wool version of that.
These are just the winter outfits.
Is it cold in the Enterprise?
I guess so.
Yeah, all right. Maybe it would have been something like, if we had more time to devote to the Worf stuff, maybe we could have had like Geordi come to see him. Maybe we could have had Data come. You know, what's Data's thoughts on this? Like, let's hear Data's perspective, the cold hard logic approach that Data might have. And maybe if he like sees like a problem with the cold hard logic, then maybe there's just fundamentally something wrong. You know, you could explore something with that.
Interesting that I could see Data going potentially either way, right? With the sheer logic of it going, all right, Worf, you know what? I see where you're coming from. Your life will be completely different. You will never have, you know, you won't be able to do this job. I get it. Like, I could almost see that being the argument from Data. Yeah,
but I could also see Data, you know, analyzing the people around and going, it'll have such a detrimental effect to everyone else that maybe, like, you shouldn't do this. Or Data could argue, well, there's so many things you could do even if you can never walk again. Like, think of all the things you could use your mind for, your tactical mind. Like, you could be at a command role. Like, you know, like, I mean, Picard, for example. Picard, theoretically, doesn't have to walk to do his job.
No.
You know? And I'm not just saying that because he played Professor X. I know there's like a role where he was famous for being in a wheelchair for like the whole thing, but but seriously, you know, he could do what he does. He can make his speeches without ever needing to walk. So, like, Worf has so much to offer, and it's just kind of, you know, more of an argument could have been made, even if Worf never listened, and because that would make Worf's determination and like his you know, attachment to his Klingon, you know, loyalty and his pride and all that stuff, like that would have all felt even stronger if he heard good arguments, if he heard good things that don't make sense to us, and he still says, no, this is still more important to me, to, you know. So
I don't disagree with that, and that might have made him making the decision for his son hit a bit harder as well.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, you think he's going to ask his son to help kill him, because he calls him in and says, I asked you here. And you think, oh, is he going to actually ask ask the son to do it? And instead, he just, this is where he tells him, no, I'm going to take the operation. Return this knife to my my thing. Although it is notable, he does make a point of saying to Alexander that, like, tradition would dictate that I now end my life, but I'm going to break tradition. And he kind of implies that he's breaking it for him. So this, in a big way, is maybe like the first real, you know, showcase to his son that he's willing to like do away with convention, that he's willing to change things for him. So I think that's maybe a big deal for it. I don't know how much characterization Alexander's going to get over the course of the rest of the show or into Deep Space Nine, but
I think it's still important for Worf either way, though.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think it's followed through at the end of the episode as well, where he's like, no, let the kid come and help me, you know, in the physical therapy.
Yeah, he's got the bars and he's trying to, like, because he still has to sort of retrain his limbs and like whatnot, and Troy holds him back. Troy holds Alexander back. No, he has to do this on his own. And Worf says, no, I wish my son will help me. And, you know, it's just him accepting that he does need help. And again,
breaking from Klingon tradition.
Yeah, and even if it's not for him, even if it's just so that the son can feel helpful, it's still a big deal. You know,
yep.
Even if he doesn't feel like he needs the help, it's like, no. But, you know, I like to think he does. I like to think that he's finding comfort and his son wanting to help him. So that's heartwarming. It's a nice thing to end on. Yeah, so there's a lot of good in the episode. There really is. I don't want to like sit, but this did have potential to be like an all-timer, and I think it comes in at being more of a flawed good episode.
Yeah, I think for me I said it wasn't disappointing because it's still a very good episode for me. It's disappointing that it's not an all-timer, sure, because it's definitely not that. But yeah, I liked it a lot.
All right, well, next time we have an episode called The Outcast. And here's a description on IMDb. While aiding an androgynous race who lost a couple of members in an unmapped region of space, Riker falls for one of them, which can lead to trouble if detected, since the alien race does not encourage gender specificity, if I say that properly. So basically, by introducing Riker into the gene pool, you're introducing like a gender, and this race does not want any part of that.
I think so, yeah. This could be interesting, or it could be very poorly aged.
It could be poorly aged. It could be ahead of its time, though, depending on how it handles this.
Yeah, we've been both ways on track.
Yeah, it's not always aged well, but sometimes it surprisingly does, which clearly says that the heart was always in the right place, by and large.
Yeah, I definitely believe that.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay.
But sorry, though, what's this? Riker shacking up with an alien again? I never would have predicted that.
I know it's a character from. It's not the Riker we know and love, but what can you say? There you go. That's what's next time. So let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Ding the bell for notifications. All those things help out a lot on YouTube, which is why all the YouTubers tell you to do it. So we're asking too. So please hit the buttons. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. So go and help out and keep all the content coming that way. And you can catch us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher will have no trouble finding people to help him commit suicide. That was a really dark ending to this. I apologize, everyone.